Okay, we have, I've mentioned fiscal policy has to do with government spending and government and taxes. That to stimulate the economy, they say, well, they're going to, the fiscal policy prescription is to increase government spending or cut taxes. But they're not always agreed. You know, it's a big school of thought, and it's a cause for factions. And so, on the one side, we'll say that it's called, those who advocate for the increased government spending, I'll refer to as the demand side. And, we talked about various kinds of spending, spending on, well, all the kinds of things that the government does. And the other side of the cutting the taxes is referred to as the supply side. So one reason for that is that if you look at the demand and supply curves, prices and quantities and so on, that the example of the government stepping into the market and buying up large quantities of food, for example, is an example of the government spending practices. So this would be increased government spending, which would increase the demand for goods and services. If the government cut taxes on the business sector, for example, or the costs of production, then it would have the effect of lowering the costs and therefore shifting the supply side. So that's probably why it's referred to as the supply side, and this is referred to, well, I refer to it as the demand side of fiscal policy. So the reason I point out this distinction here is that today I'm going to talk about the supply side. And to illustrate that, there's a curve that is in your practice sheet called the Laffer Curve. It's named for Arthur Laffer, an economist. Actually, the idea didn't originate with him, but he was one that became famous for it. At one time he was articulating this to a politician sitting over dinner and drawing it out on a napkin. And immediately thereafter, the politician went out and talked about it in the news, and they said, well, where'd you get these ideas? Well, it was Arthur Laffer, an economist from UCLA. And so it came to be known that in the news. It was quite a hot item and earned its way into textbooks as well. But like I said, the idea is not particularly new to him. Anyway, what it is a showing of the percentage tax rate relative to government revenues. Okay, so what should tax rate be? 0%, 100%, between 50% and between that and 5%. Draw that out. And on the other side here, we can say, well, how much government revenue could be collected? Okay, maybe $100 billion, $200 billion, $300 billion, $400 billion. Okay, so. Now there is an assumption here that you can make that, well, if you have a 0% tax rate, you probably collect $0 in revenue. $0 in revenue, okay, so that would start out there. And suppose that you had a 25% tax rate on people's income, for example. Well, at a 25% tax rate, you might be able to collect, let's say, $100 billion. Okay. Now, the normal assumption is that, well, if you collect $100 billion with a 25% tax rate, then you could just simply double the tax rate and get double the revenue. So if you had a 50% tax rate, you'd collect $200 billion in government revenue. if that's true, then simply double the tax rate again, and you'd be able to double the revenue again, so that at 100% tax rate, you might collect $400 billion in revenue. Any issue that anyone might have with that? Problem with that?
It's a lot of tax.
In reality, or just
In reality.
Well, the more you tax me, the more money I'm gonna hide from you.
Okay.
Because it becomes more lucrative to hide money.
Okay, so here's red. Oh. Here's red. Working for Gretchen. Okay, so Queen Gretchen says, well, I will pay you $100,000 for working on my computers. And then here's President Kennedy. A little hat on here. President Kennedy, which stands for the government. Well, I'm gonna tax you on that. I'm gonna tax you 100%. Okay, so how much does President Kennedy get? How much does Red get to keep? Pardon?
Tax on that. 100.
Yeah, 100. He's gonna tax 100% of his income. So he gets how much? All of it, 100%. So he gets $100,000. And Red gets zero. So what Red is suggesting here is that very high tax rates might change his motivation. Right? Okay, so in a number of ways. One is you said hide your income. Yeah. So how can you hide income?
Under the table.
So it depends on how Queen Gretchen's paying me. Is the first question. If it's cash, I could just report zero income and keep all the cash without rising
So
into the bank.
why cash? What's the difference here?
More difficult for the government to track.
Okay. If she writes a check for $100,000, then there's a paper trail. You know, because when you cash the check's still there, it's still in the records. And so if the government's trying to prove you got $100,000 from her, it's easier to do. But if she pays in cash,
Get the check in the Bahamas.
yeah, it's outside of the country.
Outside of the country, they're having difficulty
Cash.
taxing me and.
Right. Okay, so cash is a good way of hiding income. What are some other ways of hiding income? Trade. What's that? Trade. Okay, by that, you're probably referring to barter. She says, well, I want you to do computer work for me, and then he's saying, well, what can you do for me? Okay, so she says, well, I've got this house up on the hillside. I'll let you stay there for a month, or for a year. How's that? For $100,000 of free rent. So that would be an exchange, a barter. And barter occurs either in very, very simple societies with very few people and very few products, or very complex societies with high tax rates. Because then people, in order to avoid a tracing of income and so on, they exchange goods. I had a friend who was a surgeon with the Air Force and stationed in Norway. And he told me that every time he left the base, he always would stock up with bottles of whiskey when he'd go touring around Norway. Why do you suppose he went off with bottles of whiskey? What's that? Barter, yeah, that's right. If he wanted to stay at a hotel, he just offered the owner of the hotel or B&B or whatever, here's a couple bottles of whiskey. Now, why would a couple bottles of whiskey work there? I mean, would a hotel here in Hawaii accept a couple bottles of whiskey?
I was assuming that's what you
tax?
What's that?
High liquor tax?
Very high liquor tax, yeah.
They have the class 6, they haven't heard about that.
I remember one time taking a ferry boat from Oslo to Helsinki, and almost the boat was entirely filled with Norwegians who didn't really want to go to Helsinki, but they wanted to be on the ferry boat so they could go over there and then come back. And they drank a lot. I mean, nobody can drink more than Norwegians, I think, when they get outside the limit, because then it's really cheap. But in Norway, the price of alcohol is very expensive. Are you from Norway?
Yeah,
Yeah, is that true?
that's very true.
That they can drink a lot?
That was well, we got that reputation, yeah.
Got that reputation.
But
But a lot of
yeah,
people go
with
on these
Helsinki,
tours.
well, I don't go to Helsinki. I usually go to either Sweden or Denmark to do it.
Oh, okay, yeah.
We'll take
right.
weekend trips, drive over, buy cheap meat and
Yeah.
alcohol.
Just
We'll
just
back
go and
again.
come back, yeah. And these are huge boats. I mean, this was 13 stories high.
Oh yeah. The boats are pretty good as well. And if you really want to save some money, you go to Germany.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
It's really cheap stuff.
Yeah.
Okay.
So,
yeah.
I'll have to drink.
Scandinavians got a lot of this stuff. I remember also being in Helsingborg, in Sweden.
Yeah.
And everybody on shore was taking empty bottles over to Denmark. On the
Boat
ferry,
rides
yeah.
to,
So they could fill them up and come back because it was so much more expensive than Sweden. So yeah, high taxes, by all variety of ways of trying to elude the taxes, right? Okay, so one way, one way to do this is to hide income. Because, you still want to work because you still, need to live, you got expenses and maybe student loans to pay, or, you want to go off on vacation, you want to buy a car. So you still want to work, but you do it by avoiding the taxes. Okay, what's another way that people change their behavior? Red, how else might he change his behavior at very, very high tax rates? In other words, President Kennedy is charging 100% taxes on his income. Was that, yeah?
Move to a different place.
Okay, he
different
might
country.
move away. He says, well, okay, I give up on this place here. My computer skills are worth a lot. I'm gonna go to somewhere else. Maybe he goes to Mississippi, maybe he goes to Mexico, maybe he goes to Guam, maybe he goes to Europe, or goes to somewhere else in Texas. Where?
Oh, Guam.
Guam, yeah, that's right. You knew that Guam would come up in this class, right? Okay, so he moves away. That's another way of doing it. Is it working? And there are a lot of examples of this. There was a famous French movie star. When the French decided to raise the tax up to 75% on his income, what did he do?
Moved out of France.
He moved out of France to where?
Monaco.
Well, and this guy was Gérard Depardieu. I don't know if I pronounce it correctly. My French is sort of rusty here. Have you ever heard of Gérard Depardieu? Oh my gosh, I guess. He is alive still. movies that are familiar to me, I don't know. Maybe you guys don't. Okay, you don't know? Anyone ever seen the movie Green Card, or it was the early version of The Count of Monte Cristo? Okay, forget it. But he was in the news for moving to another country. And the country he moved to, the president of the country, named Putin, welcomed him with open arms. He went to Russia. Yeah, yeah. Well, okay, there are people of Trump's caliber of wealth who've been moving elsewhere because the tax rates are high in the United States, and they say, okay, well, we're just giving up and we're going to move elsewhere. And they've got offshore accounts and all sorts of things. Is Gérard Depardieu, what's the tax rate in Russia? Flat tax rate for everybody. 15%. So he says 75%, 15%. Okay, I can live with that. When some people said, "Oh, you're not being patriotic," he says, "I earned a lot in France, and I just don't feel like paying it all to the government." So at any rate, so he left. An example of somebody who moves away. Any other examples you can think of? Famous ones?
Could it be maybe to use the black market one for goods and services?
Okay, we'll call that hiding income.
Okay, yeah.
Right, sure. You still do it, but you're finding ways of hiding it. Then, go to the black market, under the table. They don't really do it under the table, but it's an expression to hide it. Okay, so, what else might, Red do?
Go on welfare.
Stop work, yeah, go on welfare, yeah, right, instead of paying in, you need to take out stuff. So, yeah, a lot of people just say, well, it's not worth it, I don't wanna move away, kinda like Hawaii and the climate, and I don't wanna spend all the time. I mean, it's kinda risky to hide your income, because there's still a chance. There are, from Japan, you may have seen a movie called The Taxing Woman. No? Maybe it's another old movie. For me, it's fresh in my mind. It was still 1980 before you were
Maybe you
born.
should update your catalog.
Okay, yeah, I guess so. Well, I don't watch as many movies as I do. Anyway, at any rate, it opens up with this woman who's attached to the tax bureau in Japan. She's sitting in a restaurant and she's counting how many customers come and go, so that then she can charge the restaurant owner and every waiter and waitress what they should be declaring, but they don't, because in restaurant business, a lot of it's cash, especially waiters and waitresses that get tips, so a lot of their income in tips. And they pocket it. Well, it doesn't matter to the government official who's counting how many customers they have, and they make an estimate about what their taxes, what their tips should have been, and so they tax them anyway, even if they don't have the proof of it. They say, well, this is what you're. So people just say, well, okay, we're just gonna stop work. Now, my guess is that at 100% tax rate, Red might also fit into the other category, the last category, the last desperate. He doesn't want to move away, doesn't want to stop working, he still wants to work, and he doesn't want to run the risks of hiding his income and getting maybe caught and so on. So there are people who just rebel. You've heard of rebellions. The American Revolution was, among many things, it was in part a tax rebellion against the British. King George III was taxing people on everything they imported from outside the colonies, and that was a lot in those days. And, right, well, hers was more insider trading, but in any case, cities rise up in rebellion, saying, well, we're not gonna do this anymore. And, we'll protest. So, okay, so people do that sort of thing. So at what percent tax rate would might you do one of those things? Okay, well, let's say 10%, 20, 30, 40, 50, 100%. Okay, at what percent tax rate would you do one of those things, one of those four things? So how many people say, well, I might do one of those four things at 10% tax rate? Okay, how about 20% tax rate? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. How many people would do it at a 30% tax rate? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 14. How many say at a 40% tax rate? How about a 50% tax rate? 60% tax rate? 70% tax rate? 80% tax rate? 90% tax rate? 100% tax rate? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, 23, 24, 25, 26, 27, 28. This is 28, right?
Nobody else is staying, it's 22.
That's 20, yeah, I know. You're afraid I'm gonna report you to the government or something. Well, let me just do the survey again, and encourage you, because I'm not
I'm not gonna check on you in 10 years.
Well, I just want to know. Okay, let's do this again. How many people would do it at 10% tax rate?
leaving at 10 already. Hey!
How many people would do it at a 20% tax rate?
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 12.
How many would do it at a 30%
30% tax rate. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10.
Okay, how about 40% tax rate?
1, 2,
How about 50%
tax rate.
60% tax rate? 70% tax rate? 80% tax rate? 90% tax rate? 100% tax rate? We got everything? Okay, so let's, yeah, 20, well, close, okay. Okay. I mean, and obviously, everybody's experience is different, and for some people it says, well, you know, it would matter how much I like the government, whether or not I was getting good benefits or something, whether or not what kind of tax bracket I'm in.
What am I
or so
getting
on.
for paying my tax?
What do you think you're
What
getting
do you
for it?
know?
Yeah, that's right. Okay, so, so everybody's view about it is different. So what that means here is that if the government is collecting, I mean, the assumption is that if you raise taxes, you'll get more revenue. But the supply side economists say, well, that's not true. That if you collect, let's say, $100 billion with 25% tax rate, because almost everybody does this sort of thing. If they hide their income, then the government's not getting any revenue. If they move away, the government's not getting any revenue. If people stop working, the government's not getting any revenue. And it's certainly gonna be troublesome if people start rebelling. So what happens is that as tax rates go up, then the amount of money that the government collects can drop. And so it isn't this, it's this. This is what is called the Laffer Curve. That as tax rates continue to go up, the government's revenue will fall off. And at some point, they just, it drop to zero because people aren't doing that anymore. So, the prescription of supply side economists saying is, if tax rates are very, very high, and people aren't paying for various reasons, then the prescription then is cut taxes to increase revenues. If you cut the taxes, then people will earn more revenues. In fact, there are some economists that have calculated that there's a certain amount of revenue that you're going to get, no matter what your tax rate is. If the tax rate's high or low, you're not going to collect any more money, because you can raise taxes to very, very high levels, but people will find ways of avoiding it. So if you cut taxes at low tax rates, then people reveal their income. They move into this place from somewhere else. They start to work where they weren't before, and instead of rebelling, they cooperate. Okay, so the supply side prescription then is, if you want to increase government revenues, you cut taxes.
To a point.
Well, yeah, I mean, if you cut it down to zero, presumably you won't collect any money either, yeah. So, yeah, and of course, the calculation is always trying to find out, well, what's the optimum? But then they might say, well, I mean, even if you could get the maximum amount of revenues here, would it still encourage a great deal more long-run productivity and growth by keeping tax rates at very low levels? And here's some examples of this. Historically, well, I already mentioned that the American Revolution is said to be an example of the rebellion. You may have heard that when the stamp taxes the English put on all the imported products, I mean, that was a lot. It was almost everything that came in on a ship, tea or sugar or spices or tobacco, anything, had to be, you had to pay a big tax in order to have a government official put a stamp on it saying the tax had been paid, and then you could take it off the ship. Well, you know, in rebellion, a lot of the Bostonians one night dressed up as Indians, sort of thinly disguised, to go down there onto the ships and toss the tea overboard. And clearly nobody suspected it was the Indians that were doing it, because they weren't. But it was a way of disguising who the rebels were. And that was known as the Boston Tea Party. It's the term that really became associated with tax rebellion, even with groups today. And then right after that, right after the American Revolutionaries fought England to, in part at least, was to get rid of these taxes that were imposed on them. Then there was the Whiskey Rebellion of people in Massachusetts who rose up in rebellion against the government of Massachusetts and started putting heavy taxes on the things that the farmers were buying. And so they rose up in rebellion. And actually the people who had originally risen up in rebellion against the British were now putting down the rebellion against the farmers. Well, after that, there was another country that took encouragement from this American Revolution in France. The French Revolution. It had to be said that King Louis the 16th, I don't know why they just say 16, but they always put them in Roman numerals, okay? King Louis the 16th had tax rates that were as high as 80% tax rates. And that's when you combine the king's taxes, the local taxes, the church taxes, because a lot of the land was owned by the church. So, anyway, tax rates were as high as 80%. And people, well, they couldn't exactly stop work because they had to live. And even getting 20% was better than just starving. They couldn't easily move away because, well, they were Frenchmen and they spoke French, and they couldn't easily get along by moving to Italy, you know, and take Italian or Spanish or German and the other places. And probably so, because the king considered them his property. They might have tried to hide their income, and that got them into a lot of trouble because the king actually farmed out the privilege of tax collecting to some of the wealthy nobles, and they could go around and they'd calculate how much land was farmed and how much food you should have been producing on this land, and if you hadn't paid that full amount, off to the Bastille. The Bastille was a good prison, and it was the biggest, most famous one. Probably really had more political prisoners than anything else in the Bastille in Paris, but they were sent off to prisons all over the place. And they were really miserable prisons. They, dark and cold dungeons where your family had to continue to feed you, you were, I don't know. Did anyone ever see that movie called The Count of Monte Cristo? Okay, one intellectual.
I'm here too then.
Well, go see that movie. It's or read the book. It's fantastic. Oh, people read the real intellectual. Yeah. Okay. Well, that's even better. It gives you real feeling what the prisons were like in those days. Yeah, but.
How would you explain the crisis in Greece? Because the Greek people, I mean, they were avoiding taxes, but the taxes weren't really that high, but it was more of the trust of the government,
Mm-hmm.
How would you put that in a sense like this?
Yeah, well, you could say that taxes were high because they had a multitude of ways of avoiding taxes. But I think one of the reasons that the Greeks were really upset with what was going on was because they knew that their own government was very corrupt, and they had all kinds of favors for the people who were in power. And so they were being taxed to pay off on these debts that had been incurred by the elite within Greece. And they were very angry at this. And they were also angry with the Germans because, the Germans said, well, you have to repay your loans. And they said, well, didn't you know what you were giving the money for when you gave all this money, that it was going out of the country into the pockets of the wealthy people?
I mean, there's a lot, and then it goes also back even to hostility from World War II, even some of the anger that flared up. I would say that it's a lot of hostility towards their own elite as much as anything. I was in St. Thomas Square during one of those protests, talking with some of the people, asking them what their reasons for protests were, and I was talking with this one policeman. He says, we're protesting here because, they're cutting way back on everything, including our salaries and all that. Oh, but time is up. I have to go across the line and be on the defense of the parliament, and those guys are gonna come in and protest for me. They just switch places.
Okay, so, yeah. Okay, so, well, then there was a revolution, What happened to King Louis the 16th and his bride, Marie Antoinette?
They do not eat cake.
Yeah, that's right, they died, they got beheaded. And there was the Reign of Terror, a lot of turmoil for a long time, but then a guy came in who became the Emperor of France. Who was that? Napoleon, So Napoleon, not the baker of that city, but this guy came in and he lowered tax rates to 25% tax rates. I mean, he was extremely popular. People liked him a lot because now they could work and earn a living, and they didn't mind so much paying what was being asked because it was so much less than what it was before. And if they could, they moved there from other places, and they were very, very productive. It was a very prosperous society. Now, you could say that in a sense, the tragedy on the plus side is that the people of France thought by overthrowing monarchs that this is something the rest of Europe should do. And of course, that made monarchs throughout Europe really unhappy and worried about it, because when he would go march into Spain, or into Italy, or into Austria, Hungary, or into Egypt, or all over the place, a lot of times he was overthrowing monarchs and he was greeted with open arms, a real popular guy. But then he started being a tyrant himself and establishing a big empire that was going to reach everywhere, even marching all the way into Moscow, in which he was defeated by the weather, mostly that. And anyway, came back with less than 1% of his army. Anyway, he was defeated in a battle at Waterloo, yes, by the British, the Prussians, and the Scandinavians were all sort of allied against Napoleon. They defeated him, but he picked up some ideas from it. The British adopted from 1815, which is the year of Waterloo, the victory over Napoleon, until 1851. They adopted his low tax ideas. Hey, this is really good. I mean, it not only makes you popular, but it also makes you very productive. People could move into England from all over the world, starting up industry and factories, and the most famous taxes that they eliminated were the corn laws. It's called corn because any kind of grain that was coming from the continent, grown on the vast fields of France and Germany, could now be imported to England, where the prices of food was very high. Usually families paid as much as 80% of their income just to buy the food that made it possible for them to survive. So it was tough. And by being able to import their grains from the continent at a fraction of that price, they became wealthy because they saved so much money they could buy other things and live better by doing so. So the repeal of the corn laws was the removal of the trade barriers that enhanced the population of, the wealth of England. Maybe it's not a good idea to do something. Okay, so they reduced taxes on all kinds of things in England, and it became, well, the most prosperous country in Europe at the time. Came to be known as the Industrial Revolution during this period. a sense, you could say that the British, all the countries of Europe sort of believed that, well, the way you then demonstrated your wealth was to go and conquer and develop these big empires. The Germans had an empire, the Scandinavians' empire was on the wane, but the Spanish, the Portuguese, the Dutch, the Belgians, the French, the British, all of them had empires stretching with colonies all over the world. And so they expended a lot of their wealth. They reduced tax rates, but they got additional revenue, but they poured it into a lot of things that were very costly for the nation as a whole. And this confrontation of all these empires finally came to a head at World War I, where all the empires of Europe then battered it out. And in a sense, one new empire, that of the American Empire, that now had colonies in the Philippines and Cuba, Guam, sorry to say, Guam again, yeah, Hawaii. These were all came to head, and the United States sort of tipped the balance of power again. At the end of World War I, most all of those countries that were participants in World War I kept their tax rates very high, and their economies continued to stagnate. But one economy, the U.S. economy, cut taxes after World War I, and they experienced a boom known as the Roaring '20s. Say the supply side economists saying that this dramatic cutting of taxes actually led to a booming prosperity and increases in tax revenues. That was sort of the example for all of the world at the time, how to boost your economy. Then they raised taxes in beginning with a huge increase in all tariffs in what was called the Smoot-Hawley tariff, and then raising income taxes like fourfold to a huge amount because they extended the tax for the first time on lower income people, and they started to raise the tax rates a lot. They put it even to the first of the year instead of that they owed the taxes instead of just April 15th. In other words, they backdated the tax rates. And so probably the biggest tax increase in American history. And that was followed by what was called the Great Depression of the 1930s. So this was the 1920s, followed by the 1930s. And the supply side economists attribute both of those, the boom and the bust, to the tax rates that were being imposed. Now after all of this depression then led on to the world was experiencing depression, and after that led to some draconian dictators, and they went into war with each other. After World War II, then there were two stellar examples of the supply side economics. Two economies had been completely reduced to rubble by the war, had been bombed into almost extinction. Germany and Japan, both of them destroyed by massive waves of bombing and so on, and at the end of the war their economies were in ruins. And as long as the occupation forces kept high taxes and high regulations and controls on the economy, their economies continued to stagnate. But the first was to break that pattern was in Germany. The new Chancellor Konrad Adenauer, and his finance minister, Ludwig Erhard, decided to end those controls over the economy, and they drastically cut taxes and regulatory controls, the price and wage controls on the economy, and the economy blossomed. It boomed, and it was so successful that they kept lowering the taxes every chance they got over the next 10 years, and it just kept getting bigger and bigger and better. And the same idea then was borrowed by the Shoup Commission and the Dodge Commission that took the ideas to Japan, and they implemented the same policy reforms, and they started reducing their wartime taxes to the lowest levels among the industrial world, and they boomed as well,
became the second and third largest economies in the world, from rubble to those booming economies known as the economic miracles. So, economic, after the war, this was Japan and Germany. Second and third largest economies in the world, in the Western world. There are a lot of examples that could be given. One is that of President Kennedy. Believed in this notion of the supply side tax cuts, and in 1963 he was successful, just before he died, but he was successful in engineering tax cuts, which led to a boom in the American economy in the 1960s. Well, you could say that unfortunately for the American economy, a lot of the additional revenue was then poured into, well, a costly and exhausting war, the war in Vietnam. But it was a successful example. Another example was of, one I forgot to mention, back in this era, there was one economy that was doing differently than a lot of others by, instead of raising taxes, it was a country that was lowering taxes. Now this was under Benito Mussolini in the 1930s. He was known as the dictator of Italy. He was marching around Libya and Ethiopia and Spain with his war machine. But where did he get the money from that? It was actually his finance minister, Albert Stefani, who had lowered tax rates a lot and brought a boom to the Italian economy. There were two countries after World War II who got independence from their colonial rulers. And in Africa, these two countries had very similar economies, very similar population. One was Ivory Coast and one was Ghana. Ghana raised their taxes after they got their colonial independence. Ivory Coast lowered their taxes, and Ghana became the most stagnant, non-growing economy of Africa for years. But the Ivory Coast became the star of Africa, growing by leaps and bounds for quite some time until they changed their policy. Other examples could be found among the U.S. states. There was a comparison of state activity in